Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Aliana Kernodle. First responders diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder moved one step closer to qualifying for workers' compensation in Pennsylvania. Joining me with more on this story is the Center Square's Pennsylvania editor, Kristen Smith. Kristen, a proposal is making its way through the legislature. Tell us about it.
This proposal would extend workers' compensation to first responders that include firefighters, state police officers, paramedics, officers of the peace. The idea here is that all of these emergency responders experience traumatic events while on the job, and they were previously limited to qualifying for workers' comp because the requirements around what you have to be diagnosed with or what has to happen to you in the line of work were a little too high for lawmakers' preferences, for lack of a better word. At the same time, Pennsylvania is having a staffing crisis for emergency response work. So there's a lot of, not only are workers routinely subjected to traumatic situations, domestic violence overdoses, murders, car accidents, all kinds of things that would really have a lasting impression on a person. So not only are they going through that, but at the same time, they're going through it more often because there's far less workers in the field to take on some of these more challenging calls. So there's a strong appetite for getting this done. There was a similar bill in the House that was passed. Right now, both bills are in the respective chambers waiting for action. And we have a couple days left in this legislative session to see which one, or maybe amalgamation of both, moves forward.
And who's been involved with this legislation, and why do they say it's a priority?
Sure. So in the House, we have State Rep. Jen O'Mara, she is a Democrat from the Springfield area. Her father was actually a Philadelphia firefighter who took his own life back in 2003. She said that first responders are heroes, but they're not superheroes, and that making mental health care more accessible to preventing tragedies like the one she went through is vital to what lawmakers should be doing. Then on Wednesday, Senator Bartolotta, who is a Republican out from the Washington area, she referenced that story by O'Mara and actually said she experienced firsthand how important the role of an emergency dispatcher's role is when she had to tend to her dying husband, probably about 15 years ago when he was losing his battle with cancer. So she said that there's so many stories like that, and it's really traumatizing and affects the family for a lifetime, and that sort of trauma doesn't just stay within the family. It's these workers who really need that support too.
And what's the data behind how these sorts of things impact first responders?
An analysis from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration done back in 2018, it estimates that 30% of first responders develop mental health conditions as compared to 20% among the general population. There's more research from the National Institutes of Health released as recently as 2022 that says up to 10% of emergency workers develop PTSD specifically. Those numbers they overrepresent compared to the general population. And then in Pennsylvania, we have roughly 100,000 first responders. So it's not an insignificant portion of the workforce here. And it's something that there's definitely research that backs up that it is a significant issue for emergency responders.
Well, Kristen, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.